As I've shared our homesteading and cooking from scratch journey over the years, I have had many comments criticizing either my apparent rejection of our current time period in history or my taking part in something modern as if I'm being a hypocrite. Today, I'm going to be sharing my 20 favorite kitchen appliances in my from scratch kitchen because despite what the critics say, I do think it's possible to seek the simplicity of what I would consider old-fashioned living while also being very grateful for the modern-day advances that have allowed us to do things more easily, more quickly, or even just achieve a better, more quality end result in our home kitchen. I definitely see value in doing things by hand. I enjoy kneading bread by hand. I think it's rewarding to skip the clothes dryer and hang clothes on a line or plant and weed by hand. But one thing that I've learned over the years is that I can't do everything the slow, traditional way and manage all of the modern day responsibilities like running a full-time online business and filming for YouTube and homeschooling in a way that keeps my kids up to speed with their peers and paying bills and answering emails, and I could go on and on. There simply isn't enough hours in the day. So, my happy medium has been leaving space in my days for the manual tasks that are the most important and the most fulfilling for me, and then bringing on the help of modern-day kitchen appliances to help me get the other tasks done more efficiently. So, I'm going to be going through 20 kitchen appliances that I personally own, love, and truly value in my homestead kitchen, but I definitely don't want to make anyone feel like they absolutely need all of these things. We certainly didn't start out on our journey of making food from scratch with all of these appliances. We bought them slowly over the years. And frankly, if you're still young with maybe a few small children and fewer time-consuming responsibilities, you maybe have more time to do things by hand. But then as your children get older and start eating more and life gets busier, it may be helpful to bring on some of these kitchen helpers. On the flip side, if you are struggling to figure out how to feed your family from scratch with limited time to work with, or you're just looking to increase the number of things that you can make from scratch at home, this list is going to be really helpful. I also will give a quick review on the brand or version I have of each, and an alternative recommendation if I don't recommend the one I own. Okay, for number 1, let's start with the appliance I'm using here, which is my grain mill. I feel like I've said this a lot lately, but I'll say it again. I have been really diving into the health benefits of fresh milled flour. I highly recommend these 2 resources for learning more and for great fresh milled flour recipes and tutorials. And alongside of that, I'm really seeing the value in my home grain mill. Now, I do not recommend the one I have here, which is a Nutrimill. It is messy and clunky to work with, but I personally am saving up for a Como grain mill. Any of the Comos would be great depending on your needs. There is also the Wonder Mill, which is pretty similar to the Como that I want. I like the fact that these use stone burrs and also that they don't have a flour compartment to have to mess with and clean. The flour goes right into the bowl. Number 2 is my stand mixer. Now, there is a lot of debate out there on which brand of stand mixer is best, but I'll just say this. I have had this 7-quart Kitchenaid Professional for 13-ish years now, and it has never let me down. I've never had it not be able to do what I wanted it to do or wondered if another mixer could do things better. I do believe that a Bosch can do bigger batches of dough, but even with our large family, I haven't had an issue with feeling limited by the size. Our mixer is a workhorse in our kitchen. We use it to churn our butter. I've tried other methods of doing this with poor results, and the mixer just consistently gets the job done well. Then, of course, we use it for mixing up any type of dough, things like homemade marshmallows. I will say, though, that I have never used the attachment options. I had heard that these were hard on the motor and might shorten its lifespan, but also I think that just generally they're not the best at what those attachments are trying to accomplish, so I just choose other tools for the job. Okay, number 3 is our pasta machine. This one probably seems frivolous to many, but it is probably one of my favorite tools in my kitchen. I do not have the time to be rolling out handmade pasta every time we need it for dinner. I also really love different shapes of pasta, and this machine can spit out perfect pasta in any shape. You just swap out the shape insert, and I have all of the ones our family uses, but there are also a variety of other ones available online. And then I can go from starting to ready to cook quicker than I can boil a pot of water. Then fresh pasta cooks much quicker than dried, and it tastes so much better as well. I actually have a whole video where I share how I make pasta, so I'll link that below if you want to learn more. Number 4 is one I imagine most Americans have, and that is a blender. I do not have any sort of fancy high-speed blender, and although I'm sure it would be nice to have, we have gotten by with this much cheaper regular blender for many years. This is a Ninja, and we actually have gone through 2 blenders, maybe 3 in the last 15-ish years, and I just buy another Ninja because I have loved mine. We of course make the normal things that you would make with a blender like smoothies, frozen drinks, and milkshakes, but I also use it to mix up batters like muffin batter and puff pancakes. I also make nut milks, pesto, and probably other things I'm not thinking about right now. It's also nice for pureeing things, such as when I'm making spaghetti sauce and we don't want chunks of veggies in it. I just throw it in the blender to create more of a puree. Probably my favorite feature of my blender is the smaller blender cups. I use these every single day because I drink smoothies for breakfast. These cups are also great for mixing up smaller batches of things, such as when I make condiments like mustard. Number 5 actually came with my blender, but I'm going to list it separately since not all blenders have one, and that is a food processor. I did not have a food processor when I first got married and started making things from scratch, and I honestly don't know how I got by without it. I use it every few days now. In case you're wondering why you'd want a food processor versus just using the blender, a food processor is much better at handling thicker mixtures and smaller quantities. For example, when I'm whipping up a batch of nut butter, my blender will mix it up to a certain point, and then it will just sit on the bottom while the blade runs. The food processor is able to gather what's on the bottom and go from nuts to butter pretty easily. I also use my food processor for mixing up some small batches of dough like pie dough with the dough attachment, as well as a few unconventional uses like shredding soap for my homemade powdered laundry detergent. This Ninja food processor also comes with discs for shredding and dicing, but I will say that I don't use them simply because I have other tools I prefer. That is the perfect segue into number 6, which is my salad shooter. This is something I have owned for a few years. I actually grabbed it secondhand from a friend thinking I'd give it a try, and I absolutely fell in love with it. It is a tool that, if it died, I would definitely replace because after owning it, I can't imagine dealing with piles of zucchini or carrots or shredding up several pizzas worth of cheese any other way. I especially use it during the preserving season. This little tool is also how I make large quantities of sauerkraut in a very short amount of time. I did check Amazon to see if this same salad shooter is still being made, and the current version looks very similar, so hopefully it does the job just as well as mine. Number 7 is my ice cream maker. We absolutely love ice cream in this house, and we also have a dairy cow, so I will say that those 2 things make having an ice cream maker a must. Even if you don't have access to loads of fresh milk and cream though, I think it is an appliance worth its cost and the space that it takes up, simply so that you can control the ingredients in your ice cream. I have a video sharing how we make ice cream and our favorite recipe, so I'll link that below. I will add that we have had other ice cream makers in the past, and they just didn't get used as much as this one because it is so hands-off. There's no rock salt needed like the non-electric version that we had, and there's no pre-freezing of the insert like our last one, which wasn't the end of the world, but I do like that I can do back-to-back batches with this fancier version for our large family. If you're on a tighter budget though, I did also love our Cuisinart, which I will link to that as well. The only bummer of that one was the need to pre-freeze the insert, but that certainly isn't a deal breaker. Number 8 is not something we use very frequently, but it definitely earns its keep when we do, and that is our Victorio food mill. I can still remember making applesauce for the first time. I had read that you needed a food mill, and the Fully food mill kept coming up on the blogs and tutorials in books that I was reading. There may very well be a wonderful purpose for this type of food mill, but making large quantities of applesauce is not one of them. I came out of that experience thinking people who made applesauce were crazy. It was so much work, and for whatever reason, the grease on the spring was coming off in my applesauce, ruining the entire batch. I gave up on that preserving project for a few years until I heard about the Victorio version of a food mill. I decided to give it a shot, and my food preserving journey was forever changed. Not only did it make making large quantities of applesauce a breeze, it is also how I learned to make tomato sauce, pear sauce, and other purees in bulk. Basically, you attach the size of the screen that you want, depending on what you're making, and then you put any soft food in through the top. As the food moves through the mill, it separates out the seeds and the skins. Those get shot out a separate direction than the perfect puree or sauce that you're making with no other steps required. If you want to see this in action, I'll link to my video where I show my easy process for making applesauce below. There are other brands that make this same style of food mill other than the Victorio, but I'd say as long as it looks the same, it probably works great. I've never had an issue with mine, and I know it will continue to be a workhorse in our homestead kitchen during preserving season for many years to come. Number 9 and number 10 are similar, but I use both pretty much every week. Number 9 is my Crockpot. I'm sure most of you have a Crockpot, but you may not have explored all of the ways that you can use it. I use it for making healthy dinners even when I'm not going to be home all day, which is probably the most common use. But we also use our Crockpot for overnight breakfasts, bone broth, keeping yummy drinks warm in the winter, rendering tallow and lard, and I've even used it to make yogurt. When it's preserving season, I use my Crockpot as one of the many ways I cook down things like apples so that I can do as much at once as possible. Number 10 is an electric roaster, which can act like a very large Crockpot. This is perfect when I want to double a dinner recipe, whether it's to feed company or just so that our large family can have some leftovers. Lately, I've found that my favorite way to roast chickens is in one of these roaster ovens. With the self-basting lid, it browns and crisps the chicken while also keeping them super moist and flavorful. The time of year that we get the most use out of the roaster oven, though, is definitely in the preserving season. I love that I can cook down large amounts of apples for applesauce or tomato sauce for a massive batch of marinara. I also use the roaster if I have several chickens I need to make broth out of or a lot of tallow to render. For me, it has made bulk cooking and bulk preserving so much easier. I will say that the one downfall of the roaster that we have had is that when I processed acidic tomatoes in it for the first time, it completely destroyed the lining, and now I have to use a liner, which means plastic or foil is touching my food. So many people have called me out on this, and I agree that it is not ideal at all. But for right now, I depend on this appliance enough that I have to make peace with using the liners. My hope is to find some sort of stainless roaster oven insert, but I haven't figured that out yet, so we'll see. And I'll let you know as soon as I have a healthier solution to using this appliance. Number 11 is our food dehydrator. We dehydrate apples and peaches and pears and many other fruits and vegetables each year. Dehydrating is also our preferred way to preserve herbs. We also use this appliance to make amazing homemade jerky, fruit leathers, and dried mixes. It's also how we preserve our sourdough starter so that we always have some on hand just in case. I've also used it for so many random things like proofing bread, incubating yogurt, and liquefying honey without getting it too hot that it kills off all the good stuff. While this is one of our larger appliances, it has earned its keep. I always get asked if I have a freeze dryer, and the answer is no. Honestly, if I got handed one, I'm sure I would use it. I'm not against them, but I also haven't felt super motivated to get one because I feel like I can preserve everything I need to with my dehydrator and other methods of preservation just fine. I do also highly recommend this dehydrator that we have because of its thermostat, timer, airflow, size, and for how easy it is to use. Number 12 is a vacuum sealer. We have had one for many years now, and it is what we use to package meat, age and store cheeses, and preserve fruits and veggies for the freezer. Not only is it great for keeping the air out and making things last longer, but it also helps keep my freezers more organized because the packages of food generally take up less space and are easier to organize than bulky containers or even Ziploc bags. I definitely do not recommend the one that we have. This is our second one because the first stopped working completely, and even then we have had nothing but bad luck with it. It is very finicky and doesn't work half the time. Sometimes it appears to work, and then we notice later that the package has inflated with air, and it turns out that there are holes in the seam. Anyway, there are a lot of great options out there, but this isn't one of them. In fact, prior to this, we just had a cheaper food saver, and we never had a problem with that. I don't have a specific brand to recommend to you, but I just say to be careful and watch reviews before making a purchase. Number 13 is a small tool with somewhat limited range of uses, but is frequently used in our home. It is our much-loved Immersion blender. In fact, our last one finally gave out. It was just an Amazon Basics model, which I do not recommend, and I thought I could make do for a while without it. I was wrong. I quickly realized that I rely on it for several projects, like making mayonnaise, and I ordered a new one. The other most common ways that we use it are for our favorite homemade Gatorade recipe in the summer, and for soups where we want the final consistency to be a little smoother. I feel like I'm also picking up my Immersion blender for different things. The other day I used it for blending up a quick smoothie. I've also made good use of it when different recipes that are supposed to come out smooth don't, usually because of some error by me. It can quickly get rid of lumps in whatever you're making and fix that problem way better than any amount of whisking can do, and without the hassle of transferring it to a blender. You also have way more control over the consistency of things with an Immersion blender. With a regular blender, you put the mixer on, and within a few seconds, the entire thing is pretty well smooth. The Immersion blender allows me to be selective, such as with potato soup where I still want some chunks left. I actually own 2 Immersion blenders, now that I think about it, because I have one that I also use for making soap, and that makes that process way easier as well. Number 14 is an Instant Pot. I will admit that I was very skeptical when we first got an Instant Pot, especially when I realized how long it takes to actually come to pressure. So yes, it may only take a few minutes to make rice or hard-boiled eggs, but add in the time to come to pressure and release the pressure, and time-wise, I could have already done it the old-fashioned way. I have since learned, however, that not only can I do much more with my Instant Pot than I ever knew back then, but that the magic of a pressure cooker is in the hands-off nature of the process. It is a very set-it-and-forget-it appliance that I feel like has made many projects much more manageable, even with little ones underfoot. One example is making yogurt. Can I boil milk on the stove? Absolutely. Can I incubate yogurt in the oven or slow cooker? Yes, I can. But it is so much more convenient to just dump the milk into the Instant Pot and walk away without having to stir or worrying if it's burning or getting too hot. I remove the pot just long enough to cool it and add my culture, and then return it right back to the Instant Pot for the final step of incubation. It's so hands-off that I can fit projects like making yogurt into my day without much thought or effort. We also use our Instant Pot for making hard-boiled eggs, cooking baked potatoes, soups, roasts from frozen, defrosting frozen meat, and so much more. I also use it like a slow cooker when I'm making a bunch of broth or apple preserving and I need more space than what my slow cooker and roaster have. One recommendation I have is to make sure you're getting the right size for your family. We have an 8-quart, which is great for a large family. I never feel like it's too small. However, if you only have a few people in your family, that is a lot of extra time it's going to take to come to pressure just to fill the void, so you would definitely want a smaller model. Number 15 isn't going to be a suggestion for everyone, but I know many of you who follow me here are homesteaders and DIYers, so you may end up valuing this appliance as much as we do, and that is a meat grinder. In fact, if you're a hunter and don't own a meat grinder, I would highly recommend it. We have not had one for very many years, but I already can't imagine not having it. We now process all of our own venison, which is our primary use for it, but it's also great for taking other cuts of meat, even if you have them processed by a butcher, and turning them into jerky or ground meat for other purposes. This meat grinder is the same brand as the vacuum sealer we don't like, but so far the meat grinder has been great. In fact, number 16 is also made by the same company, and that is our meat slicer. This is the appliance that allows us to make homemade lunch meat that is so much better and healthier than that nasty, slimy store-bought stuff. I do have a video showing this process as well as recipes on my blog, so I'll link to those as well. We don't get our meat slicer out very often, but I still feel like it's been completely worth its cost and storage space. Number 17 is our juicer. I definitely use this more in some seasons of life than in others. We primarily use it right now for apple juice, but I really want to start buying our citrus in bulk each year and juicing our own citrus so that we don't have to buy lemon and lime juice each year, And because freezing fresh juice versus canning it either at home or commercially helps preserve all the nutrients in the juice that are so good for you. There is so much out there on juicing, and I should actually really do more of it, so it definitely earns a spot as one of our favorite kitchen appliances. Number 18 is a very simple, small appliance, but it has made a huge difference in my kitchen, and that is my scale. I use this almost every day for some recipe because the fact is, measuring by weight is going to give you much better and more consistent results. I actually just measured out marshmallows earlier today, which would have been hard to estimate in cups because there is such a varying amount of space in the cup when you're trying to scoop them. And then I use my scale often for things like sourdough bread, soap, and tallow balm. Number 19 is my pressure canner. With water bath canning, you can make any large pot work, but with pressure canning, you have to have the right tool for the job. I upgraded to an all-American pressure canner a few years ago, and although it was a bit of a learning curve, I absolutely love it now. You can just tell that this canner was made to last generations. I also love how it has both a weighted gauge and a dial. I didn't want one just with the dial pressure gauge because technically you need to have those checked every year, and that just sounded like a pain. However, there is a lot of peace of mind in seeing the actual pressure and hearing the rocking of the weight at the same time. This ensures that I don't accidentally put the wrong weight on because I would notice that it's not the right number. It also ensures that my pressure is staying in the right range of safe as I'm trying to monkey with my gas stove and get the heat just right to maintain a consistent pressure. I highly recommend an All-American, but I will say I actually paid for the larger version, which would have fit 2 quart-sized jars stacked on top of each other. Unfortunately, I didn't even notice that I had the wrong model until almost a year later because I had purchased it at the end of the canning season. I obviously didn't even try to complain since it was my fault for not checking, but if you have a big family like we do, I highly recommend their largest version because that would have been a very nice feature. One downfall though is that they are very heavy, especially with water in them. When I'm pregnant or newly postpartum, I definitely have to have someone lift it for me. Number 20 is a common one, but I had to mention it because it gets used so often and we definitely love it, and that is our popcorn maker. We actually had this same one years ago and lost a few pieces, so we went ahead and purchased the exact same one since it has served us so well. Okay, that is our top 20 favorite kitchen appliances. I'm sure I'm forgetting a few, but I'd love for you to post in the comments what kitchen appliances or gadgets are your favorite for making things from scratch and maintaining an efficient kitchen. Thanks for joining me, and hopefully you'll be back here on Tuesday for my next Ditch the Grocery Store Challenge video.